Greetings, listeners, and welcome to Roll Off a Tangent, episode 28. My name is Robert Gibson, and tonight I'm once again joined by my co-hosts, Nikita Zuev and XJ. Today, we dive deeper than we usually do into historic literature as we explore the works of, or rather one work of Alexander Pushkin, renowned as Russia's greatest poet, and also as a writer of prose tales, one of which we are going to discuss here, named The Shot. It's set either in the author's own lifetime or shortly before, that's to say, in a culture in which dueling is rife. The tale begins in an obscure, nameless village in which are stationed some Russian military officers. Isolated in this hamlet of nobodies, the officers enjoy the company of one mysterious gentleman, an ex-soldier named Silvio. In his house, champagne is always at hand to bubble in one's cup, and rowdy songs are sung way into the night. Silvio has quite a reputation. Formerly in the Hussars, he has a habit still of shooting up his own house for target practice. Everyone views him as a brave and formidable marksman until, after an incident with a fresh recruit from the regiment, his honour is put into question, when, to everyone's astonishment, he does not retaliate for a slight given to him. Allowing an insult to go unpunished in the period when this story was written was highly unusual and extremely detrimental to one's reputation. Silvio leaves everybody guessing as to his motives, until on the last day in the village he confides in the tale's narrator. He explains that he has received information about an old rival who had insulted him long ago in a boyish dispute of pride, showmanship, masculinity. At that time, for reasons explained in the story, the quarrel was not resolved. Ever since, Silvio has avoided other challengers because he has been saving himself for an opportunity to revenge himself against the offender in the cruelest manner he could think of. Now that the man is getting married, Silvio's golden hour for vengeance has come. Silvio departs, and the narrator of this story does not hear from him for a long time. The years pass, and we follow our narrator into retirement. Life has become dull, until finally excitement arrives in the form of a count and his beautiful young countess who settle in the neighbourhood. Our narrator has the pleasure of meeting the couple in their manor. There he notices a painting with two bullets stuck in it, an odd sight which sparks off a conversation that reveals that this count is the very man who was the target of Silvio's plans for vengeance. It turns out that Silvio did visit this person and extracted his revenge not by means of a lethal bullet, but psychologically through threats which made the Count fear his young wife. Thus, Silvio could declare himself satisfied by having frightened instead of killing the newlywed noble. I've given you a short summary there of the story, leaving out what I think of the absolutely totally evil nature of Silvio, because I don't want to prejudice our audience against him.
Indeed. Actually, what did you think about the story?
Well, so first of all, this short story does not exist in English. Am I right? And that you had to translate it yourself.
There were translations of the story to English, but they were not in any way, shape, or form satisfactory to my taste when it came to translating the feeling and the language of the tale. I took the best translation that there was, and then I basically went from word to word in Pushkin's version, and I created this new version, which I feel is much closer to the atmosphere that Pushkin was trying to create with the story.
I see. So sorry, my other screen is I'm monitoring the recording on my other screen, so I don't have the short story up. Who is the other guy?
I think his name was. You're putting me on the spot here. Mark something. I'll have to look it up in a second.
Okay, Mark something, Mr. Something, Mr. Something, and Nikki contributed to the version that we are reading today, and so first of all, I have to say that the translation itself worked fairly well.
I was super off whatsoever. His name was Brander Matthews.
Brander Matthews. Okay. Brander Matthews, Mr. Matthews, Nikki's contribution to the piece that we read this week, I thought was very well translated. It flows. It didn't have the sort of really awkward flow of language that you sometimes get from pretty bad translations, and I can think of several Mandarin to English translations as well as English to Mandarin translations right now. As in, I read the I don't even know if it's possible to do this, but I did read the original I did read a translation, an older translation of Water Margin, and let's just say it did not flow well at all, and that's like English that's like the English version of a very old Chinese classic. So much respect to the effort of the translation, first of all. I have to say, it really did flow well. The language, the sentences flowed from one to the other very nicely. I could understand exactly what was going on. No doubts at all to who is who, and I feel like whatever feeling or atmosphere is trying to be conveyed in the shot was also quite masterfully conveyed. My problem is I don't understand any of it.
You don't
What do you
understand the
mean?
motivations.
Yes, exactly, right, correct. Like I could follow all the sentences. I know where the characters are coming from. I just can't relate to any of it.
Well, that probably does you credit, actually. It's an extremely evil institution, dueling, in my view. Although, when it started off, it was no doubt replacement for something even worse. That is to say, in the old days, in the very, very old days, before dueling, so-called gentlemanly dueling arose, there were probably endless vendettas and ambushes where you just got sort of a few dozen of your buddies and ambushed your enemy and slaughtered him, whereas and then you got slaughtered back, and so on and so on. It went generation after generation. But now you got this idea that it was just one against one, and it was a bit of an improvement. Of course, human beings being what they are, it soon degenerated into a sort of egomaniac marksman's charter that, as we see in Pushkin's The Shot, very, very powerful rendition of someone who is so eaten up by his own pride that he can't bear to come socially second in anything whatsoever, and he's prepared to kill in order to revenge himself on someone who's done him no harm.
Yeah, and And I guess for myself, everything you just said, Rob, I didn't know the historical context of dueling and any of that stuff, but I just found it really alien to nurse a slight for almost his whole life. I would say.
May I? Oh, sorry, go on. Sorry, go on.
Is it his whole life? Almost his whole life, right? Like at least 10
Well,
years.
like 10 years plus or minus. I must give you an explanation.
Okay,
So,
please.
in the time when Pushkin wrote this was a contemporary tale for him. He's written about a situation that could have happened yesterday in a town anywhere in Russia at the time, right? In any part of the empire. So, three things were constant within the society at the time. The the culture had been slowly been replaced by a very large and strong French influence, to the point where nobility spoke in French to each other, and they only used Russian when they had to talk to the serfs, to the lowest of the lows, right? Secondly, you had so many nobles uh, at the time that basically a lot of them didn't have proper rank or proper means to sustain themselves, and therefore they indulged in debauchery, they indulged in drinking, they indulged in every which way one could find a release of their vices. And when you get a lot of rowdy, prideful people who drink all the time and have these sort of like intricacies between each other, they have to see each other daily, you're going to have disputes. And because nobody had anything to their name, really, besides maybe a plot of land or, like a few golden coins, pride and your reputation became your ticket to anywhere. If you wanted to go to a nice, beautiful galley, or to a tourney, or to go see a minister, reputation is how they met you. They met you with seeing how you were as a man, how or a woman, how people spoke about you, and ultimately, this is the way Pushkin died because of his pride. When he had nothing, and he had to defend his pride in order to sustain himself in any way, shape, or form in that society, for which he paid dearly. So imagine a sort of a society in which your worth is your reputation, and kind of everything else falls by the wayside. And in it, you can now slowly crystallize the idea that somebody who was a soldier and remembers 10 years ago when someone slapped him in the face, because that stays with him until he dies, unless he rebukes it. And that's why it is so strange for the officers at the beginning of the tale that Silvio gets slighted and he does nothing about it, right?
But
Because
even,
it's
yeah.
yeah, go on.
It's even stranger, though, that Silvio confesses his low motives to the narrator. He admits that the original quarrel was due to namely Silvio's own vanity. He
And
admits it.
promiscuity, because he was jealous of that young strapping officer talking to woman which was not his, but some countess that he had a fling with. It's like, how dare does he talk to one of the girls I used to talk to, right?
Yeah.
To him, that's enough to start something, because truly he hated the man and he was waiting for a moment to sort of like smear his reputation.
But it's like saying, well, I mean, he certainly lets the cat out of the bag as far as his own low motives are concerned. He admits that the other person was better than he was, in fact, in every way, and that's a reason for killing him. It's it seems psychologically daft. I'm not saying it's implausible, because human beings are capable of any folly, but it's rather strange even so.
Well, this is where my third point about this situation comes from. So, firstly, the French culture. Secondly, this whole dueling situation that has transpired.
It's all because of the French. It's all the French fault.
Oh, as always, right? And thirdly, by the way, Pushkin first spoke French before he even had the possibility to speak Russian. That's how ingrained French was in Russian society at the time. But let me get back to the third point. The third point being that jealousy was an ingrained part of society because of how many was so much lower than the rest. And whenever you saw somebody who was higher than you in that situation, you would always think as yourself as the misfortunate individual who did not deserve to be lower than them, and them being above you, being about what Silvio mentions 5 or 6 times, luck. That was the whole situation when it came to these strange and very superstitious like beliefs at the time. In fact, I'll tell you an interesting story. So on the 26th of December in 1826 or 25, Pushkin should have been in St. Petersburg. And this was the same date where a bunch of revolutionaries wanted to overthrow Nikolai I because his his father Alexander died, and his Alexander's brother was supposed to take the throne, but he didn't. He abdicated, and Nikolai was next in line, but he wasn't there. So there was this interregnum going on, and so during this uncertain time, the revolutionary individuals wanted to take control, and the reason why Pushkin wasn't there was because of a superstition. He was driving from his village a few weeks before that, and he saw a rabbit run past the gates by the road, and that is a superstition in the olden Russian days, meaning that do not go this way. And he didn't go, and all his friends who were part of the revolution were hanged. And so there's all these sort of like tales and stories during his time where superstition saved people and luck was the thing that sort of like pushed you forward and so on and so forth. So that's where it really comes from. He is angry not just because this guy is better than him, but he's angry because for some reason Lady Luck smiles at him and he doesn't smile at him as much. At least he believes.
Right. Wow. And the narrator is so into all this as well that he seems to quite sympathise with Silvio, and in fact there's an interesting part where he says that he feels kind of second-hand shame that that Silvio hasn't
committed murder.
Yes. Murder. That's right. Yeah. Second-hand shame. It's a really powerful hold on the emotions, this code of dueling.
Yeah. That's all they had. You had nothing. You had, rum, women, and dueling. That's all they had in those times.
Wow, that's a lot of resentment to hold on to, and I'm not one for judging peoples in the past with peoples of the past with our moral standards, but I don't know. I really can't relate to the cast in the short at all, just because it seems so tiring to.
Be so mad.
Yeah, I'm a pretty lazy fellow, so I think of the emotional energy you have to expand to hold on to that hate and that resentment. Just seems like, man, I would just rather chill and have a drink.
It's useful though to think that we in our modern age aren't the only people who are bad and evil. There are other people who are bad as well. It's kind of, because I tend to think of our age as the ultimate in yuck, but actually, if you look into it, there were some past
Serious yucks.
that were pretty yuck as well.
Yeah, way back when. I mean,
Well, the story is sorry that I interrupted you. Actually, the story is very romanticized. The level of anger and like holding on to it is exaggerated for the story. I am sure. However, there are many like many accounts, including Pushkin's own life, where duels would have such situations. For example. And as I was researching for the shot, this shocked me because there is a scene in the shot which is basically Pushkin's autobiography. Can you guys guess which one it is?
he goes to the nobleman's house to threaten.
No.
Shooting his own wall.
That is also part of his autobiography, but that is less interesting. So, during the time when he was in, I think it was Kisilov or something like that, the current Moldavian capital. When he was stationed there as an officer, there was a moment where he slighted an officer by coming in drunk and taking a bunch of billiard balls and switching them around while the man wasn't looking. The man threw him out of the inn. Pushkin came back with a gun, and he said, like, okay, tomorrow, you and we shoot each other. And in that morning, this was against Lieutenant Zubov or something like that. Zubov translating to thief, so his surname. And
Lieutenant Thief.
The two, Lieutenant Thief, and the two of them came at each other, and Pushkin was coming back from a small what's it called? From a small wood incline where there was a bunch of trees that would bear fruit, and he was coming back with a cap full of red and black cherries, and that was his breakfast. And he came in, and the man tried to shoot him, and he missed, and Pushkin didn't shoot. He was just like, I'm just gonna continue having my breakfast, and he walked off. And that was the greatest of shames, that he ignored the duel completely.
So he was the officer.
Yeah, he was like, so he indeed. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah. It is. Yes.
Good.
So in fact, you can insult somebody by not shooting him.
Good.
Yeah, that's an even further insult, because you say, like, you are not worthy of us having a duel. You've taken a shot, you've missed. Goodbye. Like,
that is so odd to me. I mean, like, okay, there is also one component of it that I can't relate to as well. It's not just the resentment and stuff like that. And that is, at the end, Silvio did not shoot the count or whatever that noble guy is. And I'm like, why not? And I can't, I
the way you said that.
I like really, why not? You had him cornered. You like Silvio, not you, but Silvio had him cornered. He was about to shoot, and then he drums up this elaborate reason for not shooting, because not shooting is more somehow a bigger slight. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute.
It's related. The reason why I didn't shoot him the first time, it's because Silvio's not interested so much in inflicting death as inflicting humiliation. So
pain.
He wants the other guy to show fear.
And I guess this is this really is how I can't relate to it. Like, to me, it's like, so the guy feels shame, whatever. I'm still alive to talk about it. To me, that is the big win. Like, and if I'm the officer, I would totally have just shot Silvio when he turned his back. put an end to the whole thing. I mean, like, I really can't relate. Not because I'm a good guy. I need to put it out there. It's just like I can't see the logic of it at all. Like, so they would say that there is this great shame that they inflict on the opponent, and that's why they come up on top. But then they had to go into this elaborate reasoning to make it so, and that to me felt like they are talking their way out of it, and I'm like.
So, as I tried to explain before, the reputation was everything at the time.
Yeah.
And it is, death would be a relief for him, because it would mean that his reputation has now been scored, it has been settled, he died in a duel, that's honorable. Instead, he has to live with the fact that the man didn't shoot him, and that he was ignored as if he was some child. And that he now every time he has to go anywhere, that's all people are going to think about. Most places might even bar him from going to them.
I mean,
because he will be looked at as a nobody.
I get that. No, seriously, I did get that. What I don't get is the fact that Silvio had to give an elaborate explanation of how he would be shamed and blah blah blah, and that felt fake to me because he had to come up with this whole reason. Like, sure, I'm sure the officer carried that shame with him for the rest of his life and all that, and every time people ask him, he had to say that and then feel real shame, and to me that's very alien as well. But okay, I accept that. What I don't understand is why Silvio had to go through all that trouble to explain why is this honorable. And to me that sounds like an excuse. Like, if you had to go through so much talk to make that evident, that feels fake to me. It feels like something that he had to explain himself. Like, if it's such a,
like, he was like talking himself out of killing this dude.
Exactly.
I see. Well, I mean, that's an interesting angle, actually. Perhaps that is what was happening. Perhaps he was, because he is quite evil. This is one thing I want to say that Robert was hinting at. Silvio, the Count, and even the narrator are very evil. Like, they're evil people.
I wouldn't call them evil, but they are not. They're bastards, I guess.
However you'd like to call them, they are not role models for your children, ladies and gentlemen.
Absolutely. No, please don't raise your children that way.
and Silvio, the only reason that he didn't kill that officer at the beginning was basically like, what if he's a good shot and I don't get to have my revenge? That is the only reason why he let that man playing cards with him go, right? So already you have to understand that these are people who live by the sword, die by the sword, and don't care about others, and how they will live on. However, with what you're saying, actually, perhaps Pushkin was trying to showcase him thinking through the laws of the current society and justifying to himself why he is not going to make this countess a widow. Why he's not gonna kill him. Perhaps that's what he was doing. Perhaps it is a moment of redemption, because the way Pushkin finishes the story is that, and then that dude died valiantly during a rebellion, right? So he maybe have redeemed himself in a way.
It's possible.
I mean, yeah, perhaps. I if that is an interesting angle to look at it, I have to say, like, at the end of it all, it is a redemption story. Very, very, different from the kind of redemption stories I'm used to, which is basically Star Wars. Very childlike in some ways. I mean, the redemption stories that I'm used to is more childlike in some ways. Yeah. But yeah.
I personally enjoyed the fact that in this narrative, everyone is horrible. It's very refreshing. There's far too many, works where even the villain is somehow misunderstood, and you could really be on his side. It's like, look, if you're on the Silvio side or the Count's side, you're horrible. You like, you shouldn't interact with human beings. They're both terrible people.
They are all terrible
should
people,
get their
yes.
yeah, and they should get their comeuppance. And I think the greatest slight of the entire prose is the fact that nobody gets their comeuppance at the end. Because even Silvio gets to die valiantly somewhere in a different war, right? And the Count gets to live, and the narrator doesn't learn anything. They all continue living in this system, right? Nobody learns anything.
And in a way, I think that is probably the truest representation of life ever. But yeah, so
Nobody learns anything.
Yes, exactly.
No, but dueling did die out, didn't it? At least in that form, in that so-called gentlemanly form. All right, you still get, a gunfight at the OK Corral and all that sort of stuff. But dueling in this form died out, and I'm interested to know exactly when that happened. I think in the 1830s it was beginning to die out, at least in England. In England, there was plenty of dueling.
I'm pretty sure. I would bet. I have no idea, but I would bet that it died out proportionately at the same rate as the power of the weapon starts going up. when you start being able to bring machine guns to a duel.
I don't think it was that, actually. I think it's something to do also with the law of libel became stronger, and so you could duel in the courts with somebody, whereas in previous times your reputation had no safeguard except through a duel. Whereas now we've got very strict laws of libel. In fact, the pendulum swung the other way, and you can virtually get had up for libel if you tell the truth. In fact, especially if you tell the truth.
Many sources say that around 1859 is when dueling really began to slow down and disappear around the world. But just so you know, in 1908 was when the first manual of official Russian dueling code written out. So we still had it for a long while. I think it only stopped when the empire died, really.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, now that begs the question for me, which is, when did dueling die off in China? I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah.
I am your Google man today.
In America, Andrew Jackson, the 7th president, fought plenty of duels. Probably not while he was president, but before then. So.
Maybe even while he's president. That would be funny.
And also in 1809, 2 British cabinet ministers in the same cabinet fought a duel, Castlereagh and Canning. I don't know that either of them actually won. I think it was inconclusive.
Right, let's talk about the shot a little bit more.
Yeah, actually, there's a question I want to ask, and that is so you had a reason to propose the short as a short story that we read, right, Nikki? What is it?
Yeah. So there are many stories by Alexander Pushkin that are well known and are interesting. There are many, fairy tales that he had written that were very interesting. But to me, I think that you should judge an author by when he writes something that he knows about, like really knows about, can go into real detail. And this short story is basically Pushkin's life, because that's all he cared about. He never had any money. He always spent it on drinks and partying and having like intercourse, and going to different places in Europe. He never had a dime behind his ear. He always spent it on everything, and he lived a life of somewhat squabble, in squabble, but somewhat very expensively, just like Silvio does. And I really believe that the Count and Silvio are Pushkin. Both of them are, and and the story is a fight between himself, and that's why he showcases these characters to be so evil. Because when one assesses themselves, they are quite detrimental to their own being. And so having this, unless you're XJ and you love yourself.
No. So yes, I mean there is that. I do have a healthy amount of self-esteem. I'm gonna phrase it that way. But so let me just stop you there. Every time you look into yourself, you self-examine yourself. It's from a bad light. Is that what I'm hearing?
Not bad light, but you are always much more negative towards your shortcomings than somebody from the outside would be, because you know every single intricacy of yourself.
Okay.
And to me, the reason I like the shot so much is because not only is it a good example of a writer writing about something he knows something about, the military, dueling, honor, everything that Pushkin cared about and strived to be. But it is also a story written in the classical Pushkin way, where the end is way worse than the beginning. The beginning is amazing. The setup is fantastic. But the end struggles. In my opinion, he could have done it much better. He could have had like a rewrite on there, but he didn't. He wrote this story in 3 days. He made the first story on October the 12th, the first part of the story, and then he wrote, well, and the other part is missing, and I'm not going to finish it, because whatever. And then 2 days later, he wrote the second part. I was like, okay, it's finished, here you go. And this perpetual laziness that Pushkin had is encompassed in this story, because he was like, good, yeah, all right, okay, and that was his entire life, and it's what's so beautiful about him. Because can you imagine if he was less lazy, how amazing his stories would be?
Yeah, they might not have the same charm though if he'd been less lazy. You just don't know, do you?
Yeah,
That's true.
I was about to say that. Like, whatever. If he is less lazy, I doubt his characters would be as flawed in
But it's
that particular
interesting
way.
You wrote in Russian, because you were saying, Nikki, that he knew French before he knew Russian. But
Yes.
he must be dedicated to the literature of his own country to write in his own proper language.
You raise a fantastic point, because there's a saying in Russian, which means Pushkin is our everything. Pushkin наше всё. And what it's talking about is at the point where Pushkin existed, French was taking over Russia as a language. Russian was seldom spoken. Things were going downhill for it. And many nobles thought of Russian as a dirty, dirty language of the serfs, language that does not have any beauty in it, a disgusting language. And Pushkin was one of these proponents, one of these fighters for the Russian language to have respect. And the way he turned the phrase has sometimes single-handedly turned entire rooms of people to the different side. And he was so popular at some point that people would come in flocks to either Moscow or St. Petersburg, because in those days he used to travel from one and the other, and nobody would know where he would be. So there would be a drove of people around his place in Moscow, and then
So he's like the boy bands back in the day.
He was a rock star. He was a real rock star. People would come to his house, and then his his wife would come out in Moscow. He's like, he's not here. He's in St. Petersburg. People like, oh, okay. And then they would drive there and try to see him.
That is so cute. I'm sorry, but it really is.
And he saved the Russian language. He really did. He turned it into
that is
what it is today.
so that is an amazing accolade to take to your grave, I have to say. much better, a much bigger honor, in my opinion, than any duels he fought.
Well, he died in a duel.
Yeah, which is stupid. Sorry, but
Yeah, for sure.
It is stupid.
It's, it happened 100 and something years ago. I
Yeah,
think we can let it go.
but having someone say 100 something years later that he single-handedly saved a language, I think that is the biggest one of the. I can't think of a bigger accolade to take with me to the grave. Single-handedly saving something
Yeah.
as big as a language, as diffused as a language. It's like it's much easier to say you single-handedly save an ocean liner than it is to. I mean, it's just a much more uphill task to save something as diffused and ethereal as a language, I suppose. Yeah, imagine that.
Right. It is fantastic. Robert, so tell us more about your actual, bare knuckle thoughts about this.
Bare knuckle thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult story to analyze in a way, because it's so simple. It's very simple to read. There's no difficulty in reading it, and it's very powerful, and it draws one in more than most stories do that we've at least most of the ones we've discussed on our podcast, draws us in to discuss the morality of it. And once you start doing that, of course, there's a danger that you might actually start no longer talk about the story itself, but about the issues it raises. But of course, in a sense, that's a compliment to the story, because if it gets you talking in that way, it's had a powerful effect. And that's what we've been doing for quite a few minutes. We've been talking about dueling and the ethics of dueling and the background to it. And all because of this one story. It's just a few pages. Was it 3 pages, something like that? So remarkable.
A bit more.
Yeah, a bit more maybe. Yeah. So it's not. He may have tossed it off very casually, but it's quite a. What shall I call it? In a way, it's a kind of moral tract. If you want to take it that way, you don't have to. But it's like saying, well, it shows that the immense harm of ego. I know we've got to have egos. We've got to have egos, but still, they make me feel they're like sort of adders or poisonous snakes of some sort that need to be crushed. But there you go. That's just how I react to it.
If you had to say which part of the story did you like more, part 1, the setup, or part 2, the conversation with the Count? Which one did you find more enjoyable?
I didn't notice what you said, that the ending isn't as good. I didn't get that feeling at all. I thought it was a very balanced story, and the ending was just as good, although much more mysterious than what before.
Let me put it this way, Robert. I do apologize. I know what this man is capable of, and he's capable of much better. It's still an alright story. I'm not saying it's bad in any way, shape, or form. Don't misunderstand me. I could not write something like that in 2 days, or 4 days, however long it took him. Less than a week is the point. And it being so perfect. At the same time, I know what he can do, and he can do much better than this ending. That was my point. Not that it was bad in any way.
So it's less than his usual standard, is what you're saying.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying, like, man, you could have you had the end of the week. There was 3 more days. You could have, looked through it maybe one more time. And he's like, nope, I'm done with it. I'm over it.
Sometimes you. Maybe it might not be evident to the reader, but sometimes a creator comes to that point, and then they say, there's no point pushing this any further. I neither have the mood for it, nor do I have the inspiration for it, and I'm making excuses for Pushkin, just like he's making excuses not to shoot the guy. And you didn't ask me, but I will say, you didn't ask me, but I will say, the first part was definitely better than the last for me, because the guy didn't shoot the count. I'm like, why?
So you would rather prefer it if you shot the count?
Yeah, I mean, there's no resolution basically. Like, or I should say, the resolution felt very fake to me. Yeah.
Should have been more punchy. There should have been something else.
No. It just that didn't really feel like a real resolution. But I suppose I take the shot as more of a slice of life kind of short story than actual drama. So perhaps that is how real life would happen. There often is no resolution to something.
So I had some, in the words of my grandfather, don't open your mouth if you can't fix it yourself. So don't criticize anybody if you can't try and do something. So I present to you two ideas that I have in order to change the end, to make it slightly better. And Mother, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I know this is blasphemy, but I'm doing it. So first of all, I like the idea, instead of making Silvio a martyr at the end and allowing him to go die in some war somewhere, I'd make it so like, okay, why don't you this would be the thing that I would have Silvio saying to the Count. He'd be like, why don't you get better at shooting? And I'll come back to you next year, because this was terrible. You just hit there, like, look, and then he doesn't look, and he shoots the thing, and he gets like basically on top of the other bullet. It says, why don't you learn, and I'll be back. I think your hand has become too soft for dueling, and that would be what my Silvio would do. He would come back every year and do the same thing to this dude. Keep like the devil, keep coming back to him, keep tormenting him. Year by year. That would be the end of the story. Like one idea for the end of the story. And so there you go. So there you go. Number one. Any takers? Anybody like it? Anybody dislike it?
I suppose it's a more dramatized version. Yeah.
Who had the choice of weapons, by the way, in that duel? Was it the Count who had the choice of weapons? Because
so at the beginning, when it started all the way back like 10 years ago, yeah, he had the choice. Yeah. And he chose pistols.
Right. Oh, I see. And you can't go back on that. You can't say, oh, well...
No.
Let's fight in the coal cellar with shovels,
I mean, I think the point is, like, usually you can, because it would be a new duel, but this duel has stretched out for 10 years, right? Because he didn't make the shot. So I guess I don't think you can midway, as the guy shot first, and then the other be like, you know what? Let's fight it with sabers. I don't think you could do that now, because logically you have to think about it as a continuous duel. And the end, and the other thing would be, I would maybe rewrite the story where the Count pleads for his life. He pleads with Silvio as soon as he arrives, and he tells him, listen, my son is coming. I was young, and and I didn't know what I was doing, and I've disrespected you so, and I understand all that, and the officer's honor is one thing, but I'm going to be a father, so forgive me, let me live. And Silvio shoots him.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way I'd end it.
Exactly. Either Silvio should have shot the Count, or the Count should have shot Silvio. Yeah, I'll take that one.
Because then, again, you have a very punchy and robbing feeling, right? And the way I would have the Countess being there is she is the widow now, and when she talks to to the protagonist, she talks about how she is always waiting for her husband to come back this time of year, but he never does, like he never did on that day. And she would say, like, and this is what the servants told me, what had transpired, and she would tell him how he died, right? So, to me, the reason I would, attempt to blaspheme and to try to change anything from Pushkin is merely because I think that there is the moral of it doesn't quite grip me. I don't really see the ending as powerful as it could have been. However, when XJ told me about his interpretation of Silvio is maybe talking himself out of it, if I look at it that way, maybe I wouldn't want to change the story. Because I like the idea that he has to recount the code through which his society lives through in order to find that little niche where he can be like, okay, I can spare him. Okay, I can be a good man. I can forego this thing and not kill him. Right? I also like that. I think that's pretty cool.
I see.
The fear that Silvio claimed to have seen in the manner of the Count at the very end is not very obvious to the reader. At least it wasn't very obvious to me. The Count, being a human being, obviously didn't want his wife to be distressed, but that's one thing. But actually showing fear for your own skin, for your own sake, is another, and I don't think he does that actually. I couldn't see it from the writing anyway, from the text.
I agree. I don't think he does.
Yeah, I mean, either way, it just like I felt like the reasoning for Silvio sparing the Count or whatever it is a Count, right? Was just a little bit too convoluted. Yeah.
So that supports the idea that maybe he was looking for a reason not to shoot him. So
maybe, I don't know. Yeah, but I mean, it was it is a very even though I don't relate to any of the characters at all, I can recognize how powerful the emotional landscape is being described, and I think that is I guess as an author you've probably done your job if that comes across.
yeah.
I also recognize now that you've read this story, why we had so many conflicts with each other when we were talking about motivations. Because I see motivations the way Pushkin sees it. We're very emotional and illogical. And it is very hard to explain to someone like XJ, who's very logical, why somebody would do these things.
Well,
That's fair enough.
XJ is kind of evolving into a sort of higher kind of human being.
Transcending, yes. Yes. In front of our eyes.
I'm becoming a robot, is what you're saying. I'm chill.
Android.
I'm chill with that actually. I rather like the Borgs.
From Star Trek, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Those are the guys that assimilate everybody and take their free will?
who yeah, exactly. Who wouldn't want to be one of those?
No, I just wanted to make sure that's the camp you wanted to go for.
Yeah,
those are your allies. Okay.
I get to be the top Borg, obviously.
No, but there isn't. See, that's not a thing in Borg society. Everyone's the same.
There is.
Yeah, there's the Borg Queen that they came up with like way later, but that wasn't the original.
I totally dig the Borg Queen.
I've never been more disappointed. All right, so back to Pushkin. I hope that maybe we could do a different author, different Russian author, but it would have to wait a little bit because if we're gonna read a Russian author, I'm gonna translate it. You know, I can't stand all of these translations that I've seen before. It has to be. You have to read it like it was written. You know, it has to feel that way. And And I think we need to go for something a lot more depressing than this one. This one was way too happy.
Right.
Yeah, that's the trouble with Russian history. It's so happy, isn't it?
No, it's very depressing. What are you talking about?
No, I mean, clearly it's too happy. That's why you need more depressing stories.
You're right about what you know. when your life sucks, that's what you're right about.
Well, have you read as the P.G. Wodehouse story, The Clicking of Cuthbert, where it introduces a character called Brusilov, a Russian novelist, and it says he specialized in grey studies of hopeless misery, where nothing happens until page 587, whereupon the mujik commits suicide.
Oh, that is such a perfect.
That's slander. Because things would happen immediately, and they would keep happening as things would keep getting worse. There you go.
Fair enough.
That's the only change I would have. There is a certain atmosphere of optimism in this story, because ultimately the Count gets to live. Silvio dies a valiant death, and the narrator keeps on living his life. By the way, this is part of the first story of the 5-part series in the Belkin Tales, and the narrator, as we'll find out through later parts of that omnibus, is Belkin. That's who's talking to us, and he's an officer himself. To me, it is unless we are speaking of fairy tales. This is probably the happiest ending that is on my memory, because no one dies, and no one dies throughout the story either. It's very shocking. The first time I read it, I was like, "What? No
Scandalous.
deaths? Is there a page missing?"
Absolutely scandalous.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
There we go.
It's a stain on Pushkin's honor.
That he didn't have anyone
Yes.
die. So one concerning Pushkin's death, right? So he died for the honor of his wife and the honor of his family, as a certain individual named whose surname was Dantes was apparently seeing his wife. And the first time he tried to have a duel with him, it did not happen. And the second time Pushkin tried to call him for a duel, he was a bit more clever with it, and he called his father, his adopted father, to the duel. And the adopted father couldn't refuse, and he himself could not fight. So he had to name somebody to fight in his stead, and there was only one man by the code of dueling that he could name. That was his son. That's how Pushkin got his way to die, actually. He didn't know that that's what he did to himself, but that was the end of this author, by creating circumstances to make sure that the duel, that fate itself, Lady Luck, that Silvio keeps talking about, tried to stay away from him. No, he wanted it, you got it, you got shot. And in the last 2 days, as he suffered from the wound, he became a very religious man. He put everything that he could in order. He tried to sort of speak to all the friends that he could during that time, speak to his wife. And he wrote a letter to the emperor, to Nikolai I, asking him to forgive him for all his misgivings, and for the fact that he had treasonous thoughts, that he had, in some way, shape, or form, undermined the monarchy. And not only did Nikolai I forgive him, but he then sustained Pushkin's family after Pushkin died. He paid all of his debts. He found them quarters in the court. He paid them salaries, and they lived without care when he died, which is quite fantastical, because Pushkin was quite adamant in speaking against the regime of Tsardom, and yet he was so brazen and so bold with his with the way he spoke. The nobility kind of admired him for it. He never backed down from his positions. And during a time when he was being interrogated, and the Tsar himself asked him in the court, "So, did you speak to those people who tried a revolution against me in December? We found many of your prose with them, many a text was with them that was yours, that was written by you. What do you have to say for it?" "I agreed with them," said Alexander Pushkin. "They were right, but they lost, and you didn't." That was all he said. And Nikolai I was like, "This man's balls are as big as Jupiter. I will let him live."
Wow.
What were the aims of the Decembrists? I know this is a bit off topic, but were they trying to?
So they wanted the power to be given back to the people. So they wanted Tsardom. They wanted what UK has now: a parliament, which actually decides things, and then Tsar as a sort of like head of state that has vetoes, so to speak.
Yeah.
That was their proposition.
Constitutional monarchy, in other words.
Yeah. Constitutional monarchy.
Interesting. Well, a very colorful end to a colorful life.
Yeah. Honestly, as I was rereading Pushkin's story, I was thinking, man, you could really write like a trilogy of books about this man's life, because some of the stuff he did was insane, absolutely crazy.
If you put in some spaceships and lasers and pew pews, I would absolutely read it. But without that, no.
No, you wouldn't read the
only if there are pew pews in it.
Only if there are pew pews in it. All right, let me just note that down. All right.
Yeah.
Would you read my Pushkin trilogy even without the pew pews, Robert?
Oh, probably yes. I should. Yes. I quite like that sort of thing. I like Robert Harris's Cicero trilogy. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts on. Oh yeah, sorry. You wanted.
No, I was just going to say Robert is very much more high-minded than me. I would only be able to read something like The Shot if it had pew pews in it. Yeah.
If it had what?
Pew pews. Pew pew.
So he's basically saying what I said at the end of last episode, where it's like, I like Starship Troopers, because it's depressing and there's a lot of guns.
Yeah, I've been thinking about why I don't like Starship Troopers. I think.
Oh my god, it's a sequel. Let's go.
Monochrome kind of novel. It's sort of very grey. There's no color in it. There's lots of action, but.
Okay. Would you say there's not a lot of ups and downs in the story, or not a lot of thrill in it, or like why does it not excite you? Because Conan excites you, and
too much militarism for my liking.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair
it's just,
assessment, because
it's a bit like it's more Forever War than Forever War actually is. Like there's a book called The Forever War. I can't recall the author. I really like that story, by the way. Yeah, I really like that story, by the way. But I guess the fight against the bugs in Starship Troopers just became an endless thing. Just kept going on and on. No end.
That's what's so awesome about it.
Yeah, endless wars. It's like,
Never-ending story.
Yeah.
The only good bug is a dead bug.
Yes.
Oh yes. Finally.
All right, last thoughts, man. Last thoughts.
Yeah. So, Pushkin's fantastical story, The Shot, fantastical in the sense that it is well written, not that it has pew pews, as XG would have liked. My honest review of it would have to be 9.7 out of 10. when it comes to Pushkin's writing. However, if we're comparing it to everybody, it's 10 out of 10. There you go. In my opinion, he was, he died way too early, just like Robert E. Howard, just like H.P. Lovecraft, all of these great minds. And I really encourage people to read more of his work, because in it there's a lot of things that we could learn that in today's day we have forgotten. Things that may save your life one day.
How not to insult other people.
Maybe in the shot, but in his other prose there's a lot of good life lessons.
Well, for myself, I would absolutely be keen to read his fairy stories. You said he wrote many of those, right?
Yes, for sure. I could translate one of those.
Yeah.
They're not that long.
I was a bit tongue in cheek about the pew pews, but I would prefer straight up literature is not my style. If it had something more fantastic in it, I would absolutely be drawn to it.
Oh, I think I know the next story. It's not Pushkin's short story, but I know another Russian short story that will make you believe that the devil exists.
Okay,
it's a
cool.
really good one.
I really look forward to it. Does it have pew pews?
It has a lot of demons in it. Demons and weird creatures and
that's
darkness.
good enough. That's good enough pew pews for me.
Okay, good.
What about you, Robert?
Yeah, sounds good to me. Yeah.
No. What did you think about the shot?
Oh yes, I think I agree with your score. Yeah.
9.7.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
I mean, the craftsmanship itself is just unassailable. The characters are unrelatable, but that's not an issue of craftsmanship for to me anyway.
No.
Yeah, I think they're too emotional in the end. I think that's why you couldn't relate to them.
It's true. I am a robot, so.
No, I'm not saying you're a robot. I'm just saying that.
But I want to be a robot.
Okay. Well, their sole motive, there is no logic. Their logic is is surpassed by their emotion. Their emotion is what matters more, right? Maybe that's why
fair enough. But like I said, the craftsmanship is unassailable. So, based on the translation that I read, who knows? The Russian one may be different.
Maybe even better. Most likely even better.
Or worse.
Well,
I'm gonna have Russians banging on my doors pretty soon, right?
You never know what will happen next.
Yeah, and then challenging me to duels. Yeah.
That is very likely. Right.
All right. Well, so that is the shot, and if you have enjoyed the discussion, leave a like, and if not, I don't know, but I won't answer any challenges. I'll just let you know straight up.
Even if you didn't like this podcast, still click like. I mean,
yeah.
What's it to you?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, thanks for listening. Until next week.